All right, I think we are live. Welcome everyone. There's just might be just a slight hiccup as we are kind of getting started. I've got just a couple windows open. Welcome everyone to our next live stream in with JC's Riptrack and Model Railroading Live. In conjunction with the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest number 3, and of course our sponsor Midwest Model Railroad. I had hoped to get Brandon Day from Midwest Model Railroad on to join us today, but unfortunately, just scheduling hasn't been working well. But hopefully, we get a chance to actually have a chance to talk to the folks at Midwest Model Railroad. But in the meantime, I am very pleased to have my partner in judging, the Ralph Renzetti, and I have to make sure that I'm pointing over here because relative to me on the screen, he's over
You
here.
got it. You got it.
And so I'm just making sure that I'm pointing the right way. But we are just getting set up, and we're going to do some. Today's format is very similar. We've had a few people send us some of this. How would you weather X, or how would you weather Y? And then we did that last time, and to a great response. And there were many things that we weren't able to cover. And so that's part of today's discussion. And some of it we also have we have a few pictures of various cars, locomotives, looking for some suggestions on how we might weather some stuff. This time we're kind of primed a little bit for it, but at the same time, Andy has a bunch of things lined up for us to potentially talk about. Actually, we can probably start off about what's on our hobby desk. And Ralph, you actually had something. Do you want to share that?
Sure, I can do that. Hang on a second. I hate saying this. I got to get it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Here we go. We're just
yeah.
There we are.
Come on, you can do it.
There we go.
There.
Okay. So and of course you said, how long ago did you?
This is a Broadway Limited AC 6000, and it's one of their what do they call it? The blue line, which didn't have a decoder in it. It was meant to run DC and run sound. The line didn't last very long, but I bought it knowing that I can add a decoder to it, and the blue line was cheaper than the regular line, and I had decoders, so I didn't worry about that. So it's an AC 6000. I started to work on this. I had the fade done 5 years ago. It ended up getting put back in a box and got put away on my shelf, and I forgot all about it till the other day when I just happened to be looking for something, and I said, what the hell is this? And I pulled it out, and it's like one of those slap your forehead times. I remember this, so I pulled it out. I cleaned the doors off there to make it look like I have new panel doors on. And the fade was already done, so I cleaned off the fade, and then I went ahead and did the ammo streaking grime.
Nice.
Because basically everything else was done. The panel over here underneath the cab, that's also been cleaned off.
Okay.
And I believe the one on the other side as well. So let's go to the other side. Yes, the other side had the clean panel as well.
Okay.
It's quite an interesting loco, an AC 6000. If you haven't seen one, it's bigger than the 4400,
right,
or even the ES 44. It's bigger by about an inch, and it's heavy as hell.
Because I would, of course, when I was living in Calgary, I would see all kinds of CP units.
Yeah.
And certain, I know that I've seen some of them. And
The
there was
interesting. Go ahead.
there was one particular spot in Airdrie that at least northbound that you could be right close to the tracks, and it was a siding that quite often trains would park there, and quite often it was mixed freight. Sometimes it was usually oil moving south. Whereas if you're east and west of the city, of course, you're getting most of the east-west traffic. Particularly, grain was something that was quite often that would be moving west, like east-west a lot. But the north-south was often oil, because quite often they would go down and right to the border, and then basically, I think it's they would actually switch off with Union Pacific there, and quite often you saw some of these big ones pulling that with this kind of wear pattern on it. So, I'm just looking over to our chat. I'm welcoming several's. Hi, Michael. Hi, the Iron Horse route. We have Jerry Hillbilly Nathan. I'm just trying to see everybody, but welcome again. My hobby desk has been working on. I have a couple commissions that I've been working on, but I've also, if you've been following on my Facebook page, that I have been testing out the solution box, of which this is the book here. Actually, I don't think you've actually seen it. The solution box is quite large. Have you seen it? Have you actually seen them up close, Ralph? They're big.
It is big.
But the thing is, a lot of it is just simply display, because you open it up and everything's kind of laid out like this. Now I don't have everything in it because some of those pieces are downstairs, but it's this big flat box. And curiously enough, it actually comes with foam, which I've already pulled off some of it for doing sponge chipping. So you can actually use like this stuff is really hard. But it actually it flakes off. It seems to work fairly well. And so what I've been doing is using that, and of course the model on the front is an Iraqi tank taken from the tank graveyards that are in Iraq from the Gulf War, that are just simply sitting there and rusting away, and using the steps in the book to do that with an N scale boxcar. And you can kind of see there, but I've got the pictures on Facebook, so that's what I've been doing. This is how it looks like on basically completing all the 13 steps that are present in the book. So I think it's 13 steps. And but there's a few touch-ups, like it will need some road markings and some data stuff, just to make it look well, one, so it looks like it belongs on the railroad, and two, if I'm actually doing operations, so I can keep track of where it is.
Right.
So so Bernard is about to run out of battery on the phone. Bernard, do you have a question before your battery runs out that we might be able to address? If we'll keep an eye out for a question there.
While you're waiting for his question, if he comes back with one, that book that comes with that seems to be quite extensive. It gives you the full step by step, correct?
Yeah, quite, and not only that, like it's intentionally multilingual. That, for example, I mean, here's the washes section, and this part up here is in English, and then let's see, French, Spanish, and I believe, pretty sure that's German, but I'm not. I have to double. I have to double check.
Probably is.
No, it's. Oh no, it is. So it's English, Spanish, French, and German. But in addition to that, it also has these symbols on what to do at each step. So as a reminder of what the techniques to be used at each step, how long to dry, how everything works. So, hi David, Sparky has joined us. We are so good to have you with us. So anyway, I mean, like honestly, this book as part of it, I mean, you get all the materials that you need to use it, but this book is almost worth the price of admission alone. I mean, this works out to about 78 euros, which is, I mean, pretty close to $90 Canadian. I'm not sure how it works out to in US funds, but I mean, all things considered, it's worth it. And then you literally have a rust starting kit, and just already knowing what the materials are in it, Ralph, the only thing that's in it that you can't use for weathering something that's factory painted, the only thing that really you could doesn't make sense to use is the chipping fluid. Everything else is usable. So it's definitely it is definitely worth it. I didn't necessarily mean to make it as a commercial advertising. I don't earn any commissions on that one. You need to go to Ammo by Meg, and get it. But it is as a, how do I get started with rusting? Just there's a box. It's one of the few times that I've seen that has sort of everything kind of out of the box. The process is different from mine. And I would imagine it's probably different from yours, Ralph, in terms of the order of stuff. But it works. I mean, they've got the proof right here. I tested it. It works.
Right. So, okay.
All right.
Stephen 87th has a question. Contest question. I worked on three cars, ballast cars, because it was easier. Do I just pick one?
In terms of the submitting a contest entry to the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest, the answer to that is yes.
But he has to have a photo of it before he starts.
Yes, as long as you have a photo from
with a date.
Yes.
Start date.
As long as you have that, Steve, we should be okay. I knew you were working on three, but the idea is you just basically, of the three, because I'm pretty sure I've got the picture that you sent me, pick the best, pick the one that you feel is the best, and just feature it that way. Although if you happen to have it on a diorama, which I don't have, it would be kind of nice to actually have a diorama to put my cars on to take pictures of. You could have all three there as long as you're focused on the one you want featured. So there's and that's more of a housekeeping issue. Now we had a number of so we've got a few more people checking in, but so Butch, welcome aboard. Did we want to? Should we actually let's have Andy throw a random picture at us right now? That might be a good way to kind of get started, because we have some other subjects. I do have the one person we may have someone joining us from the UK tonight, which is 11:30 at night, or it would be almost midnight now. About 11:45 Greenwich Mean Time,
Figured I'd start with some locomotives. I've got a few locomotives, and then we'll drop into some cars. But I've got a few. This gives you a little bit of range of some choices that you guys could, there's some different effects there that I thought were interesting.
Interesting.
Oh wow!
Wow!
That car literally melted the paint. Unlike the barbecue beaver, this one is quite literally, the plastic paint is running off the car or something, like it's made of wax.
Yeah. Actually, in some respects, there's some similarity to something like this that on a CN locomotive that a picture that I'm going to bring up a little later. So
I wouldn't even know where to start on that.
yeah, like that's
I
a
mean,
real,
yeah, okay, so you got a really good fade going on, but then you have to add the extra color.
yeah,
And
like
I kind of wish I had a full-on side view of it.
yeah. Well, let's see. That's chess. Well, it's a chassis system 3233. I wonder if we can pull that up in.
I'll look for it. And it's a U-boat.
Find it in the Railroad Picture archives of that particular one.
Yeah, I believe that's it's a U-boat. I believe it's like a U-30 or a U-23, something like that. Which Rapido's coming out with the Rapido U-23s, which is what got me excited about this one. So,
but then you get excited about a lot of things, Andy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
In some, well, I think there's a difference, Ralph. This particular one, if we were starting, like if you're starting with an undecorated, you may have some more luck. I mean, it looks like it's gone. The original primer on there was a gray color, and the paint has kind of been baked off, but the primer's largely stayed. You know, granted, I'm kind of shooting in the dark here. I'm not entirely sure. By the way, there was a quick question to Dave with Sparky. Let's see. Now that I'm hosting the DWC3, do you credit winning the first contest to my success at weathering and how I've gotten at it? I would say so. Yes. I've done I've been doing weathering in other genres before I sort of started really applying it to model railroading, but I would say since then, especially doing the channel and fielding people's questions and continuing to learn. I've improved. I mean, I still have a long way to go. I mean, hold my stuff up next to Ralph's stuff, and you know that I still have a long way to go. So,
not that far.
Yeah, but it's still, what's the thing is those that can do, those who can't teach, and I'm the son of teachers. So and so just kind of keeping in mind with that. But I'm always looking for things to improve, trying out new things like the solution box and kind of going, hey, that's kind of interesting. Does that work? And I mean, a number of new technologies or materials have come out since I launched this channel. I mean, the weathering pencils.
Oh yeah.
The oil brushers.
Oil streakers now.
And the streaker. Like I really like the streakers.
And the shaders, the whole bunch.
Yeah.
Andy, can you blow that up a bit?
Yeah, and I brought this one up as another example because me and Ralph have talked a bit excessively about some of these Norfolk and Western that were in Pampler Blue, which is gone by the time that I'm modeling, but I love them. This is a way for me to bring back that former paint scheme in all of its glory that doesn't exist. This one's a little more severe than the SD45 that me and Ralph have talked about extensively.
Mm-hmm.
That is a similar arrangement to this, where it was a Pampler Blue overpainted with black with just a large N and a large W in white, and the black paint has just completely deteriorated off the SD45. In this case, a Jeep 30, and I have some weird love affair with Jeep 30s because they're awfully ugly hunchback machines, so I love them.
So how would you do this one, JC?
Interesting, because it depends on.
It started out blue.
It started out blue, so this particular locomotive started out blue, and then they painted it over black, and then it's basically most of the black is worn.
Although you know what, I think this one still, it never really got painted over black.
Mm. Yeah.
I
You
think
don't.
I think
You
this
don't.
one did get done in black, but I'm not positive. I will find here in a moment that SD45 that we've talked about more
Yeah.
extensively, Ralph. It's a better example, and it's
But
obvious because you can see the new decaling. So
you can see where the number has been patched out and then a new number put on, and it was patched out with black.
Right. Yeah.
But the rest of it is just faded blue.
Yeah.
And the reason, to my opinion, and talking to a couple of actual locomotive engineers, the reason why that patch looks so dark by the door is where they brush against it and clean the dirt off it as they open the door and go in.
Mm.
wow,
You get
that's
the
an
same
interesting.
on the other side, but on the back side of the cab because they're coming from the
They're
long hood.
they're coming out the other way. Interesting.
So I think this one was blue, and if that's the case, it's just a matter of really fading it and then streaking it, sort of,
Yeah.
because that's what that looks like.
Well, I guess the question is, Andy, as a quick question, the model that you actually have, is it starting as the blue or is it starting as the black?
Uh, so in the era that I model and in the era that this picture was, this Pevlar blue scheme would not exist anywhere. They had been painted in black. However, my intent, and I'm up for, this is up for discussion. If you guys have different ideas about this, but my instinct is to so the SD45s that I'm going to do, I bought them from Scale Trades in the Pevlar blue scheme of the late 1970s, and I'm going to overlay with either a chipping solution or something as a base, and I'm going to overlay the black paint scheme, and I'm going to put the decals on, and I'm going to take a fiberglass brush. I've got some ideas that are not fully formed, but that's the rough ideas.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a case if you're actually starting with the blue and you're bringing it up to black, then a chipping, I would say a chipping solution of some sort, whether it's just hairspray or something you can buy. Uh, I mean, that would probably that would achieve a result like this. The trouble is that you couldn't rep chipping fluids are kind of random applications because they can certainly do a lot. They are very effective in what they do, but you're literally at the mercy of what the chipping fluid chooses to do when you start pulling it away.
And how lucky you are whether it bonds in this place or doesn't it bond in this. So could you, or have either of you tried doing, say, a little section at a time, kind of do a little section, a little section, a little section, and kind of blend it together? And if it doesn't work, maybe I don't know.
Well, sometimes, like for example, when I did this little guy, most of this is done using the chips and scratches solution because the heavy chipping fluid doesn't scale very well to end scale. And in the directions, you actually do the whole chipping fluid part is what the first several steps are working towards. And then once you do that, you then come back and actually do sponge chipping to
Right.
to match it and make it work. So I mean that's another way to go. Although like what I'm looking at here, this is definitely there's a lot of blue on this, not very much black, which means and the other thing is when spraying on the overlay color, you do it very lightly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've got another example. It's just going to take me a moment to find it, but I have the SD45 is kind of a more severe case of this same problem. It's just going to take me a minute to find it.
There's a question there.
Yeah. So how would we do the rust around the vents?
I'm not sure that's rust. It might have a bunch of soot blended in with the color, which makes it
Yeah.
look like rust. You've got it in front louver in front of the hump, and then you've got a similar color in the back vents.
Yeah, it's the kind of a reddish brown, but at the same time, Andy, where was this picture taken?
I believe this is, well, okay, so it's for sure southwestern Virginia, possibly West Virginia. You know, it's
Okay.
definitely there. I believe this is Appalachia, Virginia, but
Okay. Because, like for example, if this were taken in the Canadian Maritimes, most of the soil out there is very red. It's very iron rich soil.
Right. And that's what you'd get on those vents, because
Yeah.
it as you're driving around, you're
So
raising dust.
well, here's an example of dirt in the region. So it is not dark; it is red dirt.
okay. Okay. Yeah, because I mean, even the ballast in the in the Maritimes has a reddish tinge to it.
Huh.
So that's one thing. So to AZAC 2005, you posted a question earlier. Please do try to keep your video to 20 minutes if you can. Quite often, what you can do is you can either kind of clip for highlights or do as I do sometimes and compress for speed, and kind of work with that. But that's just because, keep in mind, as judges, we will have. Imagine if we had 31-hour videos to watch, we wouldn't be able to get through them all. So that is going to be part of it. Anyway, but coming back to your question, one of the things is to ask the question of the environment, and so which is why I asked about that, because some of the dirt and the dust could actually like what looks like rust may actually be just simply red soil with a high iron content. And so, question from Sean McGee. The one thing about getting into weathering, there's a lot. The big thing is start with older, uh, uh, something to practice with. So if you go to a model train store, the bargain basement kind of cars, use those as your test beds as you're trying out different techniques, and really just get started and start practicing. I mean, the two gondolas that I won the original Down and Dirty weathering contest, I literally pulled out of a Trains and Such in Calgary. Just pulled these two cars loose. They weren't even in cases, out of a almost like a cardboard tray on the underside of the shelf, and they were on sale for, I don't know, like maybe $10 each at best. And I mean, I ended up replacing the trucks and everything else because I think they had the old Rapido style couplers on them, but they've turned into signature pieces on my railroad. I swapped them out. I swapped out the trucks and everything else like that. So you may find that you actually get something out of a bargain bin and you actually turn it into gold. So that's one thing, is practice. Just find like the big thing is practice, mess around, find some and try different techniques. Don't be afraid of oils like I once was, because in fact some of the coolest things you can do is working with oils, because one, they're a lot more forgiving than I thought they were, and you can get some of those most realistic effects using oils.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now, and I know I've said this before, Ralph, but if there was one item for weathering that would be my go-to, it would be the Starship Filth oil color.
And mine is 1203.
1203.
The ammo streaking grime.
Right.
It's a little bit more brown than the Starship Filth.
Mm-hmm.
Starship Filth is on the black side.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty dark.
So as a go-to color, it's in my arsenal. Let's put it that way. And if I need something darker, that might be one of the ones I choose.
Mhm.
But it's not my go-to color.
Okay. Sparky has a question that's just been posted across the bottom, Ralph. This is more your field of experience than me, because there have been times where I once received a locomotive that I literally could not take apart. It had, like, things had been glued on, and I would actually break the shell in order to take it off. So I actually had to weather there was
around railings and so on.
around railings
Yes.
and everything else. I had to do it straight.
Yeah.
But anyway, do you want to?
Yeah. When I'm doing a locomotive like I am right now, the one I showed at the beginning, there's the chassis. I pulled it apart. The motor's gone. The fuel tank on this, because it's Broadway Limited, they decided to make the fuel tank out of metal.
Oh, wow.
But it also encloses 2 speakers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a speaker enclosure all in itself. So these 2 pieces have to be painted. And I paint these with the Rust-Oleum brown,
Okay.
the camo brown.
Mm-hmm.
And I work from there. So even though they're black now, when I'm done, you don't see any black. What you see is the dark colors of the rust and grime and so on. But yes, I take them apart down to the point of, if I can get the windows out, I pull the windows out.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't get them out, I mask them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you mask them with masking tape, whereas I use liquid mask.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get a locomotive like the new ones have the window wipers on them,
Yes.
the photo etched window wipers, if you can't get them out of the hole that they're mounted in, then you can't use liquid mask, because once the liquid mask encapsulates that wiper, it ain't coming off.
No, and
it'll take the wiper off for you.
take the wiper with it, and then, like, I have done that once where the wiper came off, and that's one of the reasons why I tend to shy away from liquid masks. I mean, I do use them from time to time, but this one time I'm sitting there, like, literally with tweezers trying to peel that stuff off, and then trying to get it back in. The other one that I've used for, like, as with you, is I really like working on Atlas models because they come apart very easily. And whereas the Broadway Limited ones that I've had a chance to work on, they don't. Or at least, now, keep in mind, there are certain things, because of my inexperience with the mechanical workings of certain locomotives and the like, that it's kind of like, okay, this is a bit above my pay grade, that I am more likely to weather stuff in place than you are, Ralph. And I'm slowly trying to get myself to take more of it apart as I can. So that's one of the things that I've been kind of trying to get myself to do more of. In fact, one of the I'm working on a C420 from Louisville, Nashville. That actually we can segue to an interesting point that Ralph and I did earlier, where the windows on that came out, and it's a joy to work on because I just have to do the weathering on it, not have to mask anything.
That's right.
Yeah. Whereas there's a switcher that I've had to, I've done foil masking and tape masking just on so many of the windows itself.
So when I take the railings off, I take the glass out. I take the wipers off if I can. And when I'm putting it all back together again, I take, first off, before I weather it, I figure out which drill size fits that hole. And after I've weathered it, I go back with that drill size just to clean up the hole, or maybe one step larger. And then I use hobby tack. I put a dab in the hole before I put the item back in again, and it's enough to hold it in. Hobby tack is like contact cement.
Mhm.
The same with the railings. A little bit of hobby tack, and if you have to take them off again, it's a dream because it's not crazy glue or AC. So they come off easily after that. But other than that, I forget which company it is now, but one of them does not, the walkway does not separate from the shell.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, when you're doing weathering, all your strokes are coming down from the top because that's the way rain and weather happens on the locomotive. It starts at the top and comes down. So when you're drawing your brush down, if there's the edge, the edge of the walkway, and your shell is up here, and you're coming down with your brush comes down so far, and now it hits the walkway. You can't continue going down. So you have to work the opposite way. And to get your weathering to work right, going the wrong way, it takes a lot of work.
Mhm. Yeah. AZAC 2005 was asking about where's the question is if we couldn't use an airbrush, how would we add grime and freight to the locos? I mean, for the most part, I mean, I don't know about you, Ralph, but the only time that I'm really actively using an airbrush these days is to apply my clear coat, and almost everything else is brushed.
I use it to put my fade on.
Mhm.
And the clear coats.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's all brushed.
Yeah.
Now
And
there are ways of doing the fade without an airbrush.
mhm,
I still don't like using that method,
mhm,
but there are guys that have mastered it, and I'm not one of them.
yeah.
I have the airbrush, so I use it.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, in my case, quite often the fades that I do are using the so-called oil dot fade, uh,
Right.
and which is more of a military modeling technique.
I've done that too.
Yeah,
I've done that too. I like that method, but I always sort of go back to my airbrush.
of course. I mean that's the one thing is you kind of stick to the techniques that work.
Well,
Yeah.
most of the time, if you have more than one thing, like I'm doing it for customers, so it's a matter of timing,
Yeah.
right? You have to get it done and out of the way and move on to the next thing. And in order
Mhm.
to do that, if you use the oil dot method, it takes 2-3 days before
Yes,
the
it
oil
does.
is dry.
Yeah.
Even if you put it on cardboard, put a dab on cardboard
Hmm.
and draw the linseed oil out, you still have to wet it.
Yep.
You still have to make it mobile enough to put it on with a brush
Hmm.
and manipulate it.
Yep.
And that oil doesn't dry right away.
And the thinners that you use, I mean, I've found that the oil brushes are very good for doing very quick dot fades, but that does not account for dry time. You still have to, once you're done, I can put the dots on, let it sit for less than 10 minutes, do the downward strokes with a thinner, and then but I still have to let it sit for 24 hours. So an air you know as you an airbrush is quicker. Now there was actually something sort of related to that in terms of an airbrush fade, is that I've got my color wheel here.
Oh,
um,
fancy that.
yeah, and some of that of doing fades is paying attention to what are called contrasting colors.
Yep.
Because depending upon the color you're trying to fade, sort of there's not necessarily one generic sort of color that you use to fade.
Yep.
And so, for example, I presented Ralph with a tough problem that, and I think I've mentioned this before. It's one that I'm currently working on. It's almost done. And in this case, I did have to use an airbrush fade to do it. And it was a case of a Louisville and Nashville N-scale locomotive that came out of the box looking olive green. And in all the prototype pictures that I could find of the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, they're not olive green at all. In this case, Atlas completely missed the mark on the color. It came out looking more the same color as an M4 Sherman tank. You know, and like it wasn't even close to gray. It was just like, and it was this olive green color, and I had to find a way to do it. So first person I contact is Ralph, and we kind of hash it around, and out came the color wheel to try and figure out how to push a very yellow green color into the taking a yellow green color and pushing it into into a gray, and you do that by using what are called complementary colors. I have to make sure that this is on the screen. Is that the colors have relationships to each other? Like, for example, one of the reasons why green and red at Christmas time work so well together is they are complementary colors. They're opposite on the screen. But if you mix green and red together, you get gray. Like, curiously enough, if you want to darken a red, you don't add black, you add green. And you add a dark green, and that will actually darken the red down in a good way. And it's sort of in the same way. So what Ralph and I did is we worked through here is we kind of got close, and I had to find a red violet, a fairly light red violet that I would mix into the light color of my fade. And the fade itself is I mixed, it was white with a clear coat with a couple of drops of a red violet color, and I sat there for an hour, very lightly spraying with and this is one of the advantages of the cordless airbrush, is I could actually just like go and sit somewhere other than my hobby desk.
Yeah.
Now just lightly spraying this thing over the course of an hour, and it shifted it slowly into the gray. It worked out. It worked out quite well. But for example, if you have a blue car, well, if you want to do a fade, you can add a little bit of a complementary color to it, and the complementary color to blue is orange. And just by putting a couple of drops of if you're using a white or a light gray to fade the color, just add a couple of like a drop or two of a complementary color, and it will do what's called desaturating the color. It'll push it more towards a gray. It'll actually make the color a bit more washed out.
There's my two fades.
Mm-hmm.
One is for black. Can you guess which one is for black?
Is your blue for black, or?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And the green is for red. So there's like 10% paint in 90% alcohol, and I don't mean the strength of the alcohol. 90% of this bottle was alcohol, and there's 10% paint into it.
Mm-hmm.
I just happened to use 99% alcohol. On top of that, well, for this one,
those look like Tamiya jars. Those are
they are Tamiya jars. Once I finish the clears, I don't want to throw the bottles out. I can use them for making fades.
Yeah.
So this was a white fade, and it's specifically meant for working on reds. So along with that 90-10% mix, there's a couple of drops of green in there. So that's for working on red. Then I have, it looks like pink, to work on green. So it's the opposite color.
Right.
I use the black on, or the blue on the black, only because the white is too strong. The blue tends to bring it back down to an acceptable eye level.
Right.
Maybe I said that wrong, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So I'm going to do just a quick share. And speaking of kind of blacks and reds, thought I would. This was one photo that was shared with me of how would you weather this? And These are a couple of
They look like Jeep 40s
yeah. So
or 30.
Canadian National Jeep 40s, and particularly the one on the right, the 4762, where um, uh, the Rob Arsenault of Weather My Trains has done a couple of these, and he's kind of got this down. But it's trying to figure out what to like how to actually, like, what is actually happening here in order to figure out what we do in order to paint it.
Okay.
Have you done one like this?
I have.
Mhm.
And I didn't take it to the extreme of the primer underneath the black.
Mhm.
But in order to weather this thing, you're starting with a locomotive that's already painted.
Mhm.
So I have the fiberglass pens or pens. Yeah, I guess you call it a pen.
Okay.
That scratches the white. So it takes the white off down to the black level.
Okay.
That's why it looks so scratchy there.
Mhm.
But when you do the black that's gone down to primer, you don't know really what's underneath the black. If you scratch it off, it's probably the color of the plastic.
Right.
So in order to get that to resemble what that looks like, you literally have to paint the primer on.
Mhm. Yeah.
So with a steady hand and a nice liner brush, you can do the primer on the black side of the black part of the stripe.
Okay.
And then you have to weather on top of it, of course.
Right. But I mean, one of the things that I've been sort of racking my brain in terms of how is this, like in terms of in the real world, how this actually, what's the starting point for it that did. And the thing is, this is for people who know how CN painted their locomotives better than I. Was this a case of Canadian National painted, like primed the whole thing white, put stripes across, and then painted the whole thing black? And so what we see here is that the white stripes are weathering down to a red primer metal surface, and the black is weathering down to the white first.
I think the white was added on last,
Okay.
and that's why it hasn't gone right through to the primer,
Okay.
because it's one more layer of paint.
Okay.
You can see how it starts to fade on the loco in the back.
Okay.
The like on the last two stripes on the tail of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the black is starting to go kind of funny, like there's white underneath it.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
But speaking of Rob Arsenault, this is going back probably about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I messaged him, and I was so intrigued by how he did it.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him how he did it. And his response to me was, well, I don't know why you're asking. You got the technique down pretty good now. But he did not tell me, would not reveal how he did it.
Yeah, no, he is pretty tight on his trade secrets. So this is one that's intrigued me because, of course, my major line is Canadian National, but I only have
So is
one.
mine.
I only have one zebra stripe locomotive, though. That's I have a GP9 RM, and
I have an SD40-2.
Yeah, I have an SD40-2, but it has the CN North America scheme on the side of it. I had hoped to get a zebra stripe when Intermountain did their wide noses ones.
I got a the hell's going on with my camera?
Oh,
I ended up doing a U-boat for a customer in Windsor that had stripes on it. And when I was sending him the pictures, I didn't take the picture of the whole locomotive. I had it sort of poking out of a tunnel, so you can only see the nose, or you can only see the tail of it. because I was bringing it down to him, and I wanted him to be surprised. So I did it with the fiberglass brush to scratch off the white.
Okay. So we have a question here from Relatable 100. Now, like Relatable, just as a quick clarification question, are you talking from like if we're like painting something from the ground up, or if we're working on a factory painted model? I mean,
Well,
I can answer both, but
let's address both.
sure.
So say we scratch painting.
Yeah.
So from the start, what would you do?
Well, in part, if I'm if I'm doing something from scratch and bringing it up to, quite often as I've been learning, the weathering process is actually just completely integrated with every step of painting right from the get-go. And there are times where it used to be when I did a model, I would do the model and then I would varnish it at the end of it. Now I'm I almost clear coat between every step.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
I do that.
And just to protect it, and particularly the general rule of thumb that I don't always follow this, is using a flat or matte coat prior to doing acrylic work, and doing a gloss coat if I'm doing oil work.
And see, I don't use the gloss. I use semi-gloss. So either way, you need some sort of shiny surface.
Yeah, especially
if you're
working with oils. Now, here's an interesting thing about this particular one. This one, the only time that there was actually any clear coat applied was at the just before I put these gray patches on.
Yeah, but a lot of the work was acrylic work, so
yes.
You can go one thing on top of the other without affecting the layer below.
That is true. I mean, like once you got into the higher levels, it started working with enamels, but you had to let it dry for a bit. But certainly it was acrylics in the lower layers and more oils and enamels towards the upper layers. And that would be one thing where, working on the solution box, where I would say, just for my preferences, I didn't, because I was following the steps as outlined. But I would clear, for me, I would have done more about clear coating between steps.
Okay, so that's starting from scratch, undecorated.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if it's decorated, if I'm going to start off using oil-based products or mineral-based products,
mm-hmm.
I use an acrylic clear to set the shell. Yeah. That's where my starting point.
Yeah.
If I'm putting acrylics on, then I use a dull coat.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm done with that layer, I put my clear coat, especially now if I'm going to go to the mineral-based.
Yes.
Which is the streaking grimes, the oil dot method, whatever, where you're going to use mineral spirits to work.
Yeah.
If you use dull coat and you use mineral spirits, the mineral spirits will dissolve the dull coat.
Yes.
So you have to be careful that way.
Yeah.
And I would go between each step. So my first step is usually my fade.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's such a thin fade, and there's really no binder left in the paint that you've put it on with, because you've thinned it out so much. So now you have to hold it in place. So I usually put a thin coat of clear coat over top. And mm-hmm. when I say clear coat, it's semi-gloss, mm-hmm. mixed. I thin it down 50-50 and just a light coat.
Mm-hmm. So
go to my next step.
What brand do you use as your semi-gloss clear coat?
I use the acrylic Tamiya one.
Okay.
The semi-gloss.
Okay.
I also use the Tamiya flat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tamiya flat clear is really good.
It is.
Yeah.
Now a lot of guys will buy both of those things from mm-hmm. Tamiya in a spray can,
mm-hmm.
and I can recommend against using the spray can, because mm-hmm. 9 out of 10 times you're going to overspray it,
Yep.
like too much.
Yep.
And the spray can doesn't give you the same fine particles of atomization that your airbrush does.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes what I've done is like you can do a kind of a make your own, but I find that the Tamiya clear coats work just as well. Is that I've got this big bottle of Future sitting on my desk, and if you mix it with various ratios of flat clear, you can get a nice ratio with that. But truthfully, it's whatever happens to be nearby. But quite often for a flat, I'm just using the flat clear. On this I try it was their Lucky acrylic varnish that I tried.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
How did you like that?
It takes about an hour to dry, whereas if I'm doing the Tamiya flat clear,
how did you find it going on?
Did
it seem to want to beat up?
It beat it up a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And I used it again just straight out of the bottle. It beat it up a little bit. There was a case where I was physically too close, so like it needs that good 10 centimeters, 4 inches spray speed distance.
Yeah, I tried.
Yep.
So many different times using that Lucky spray, the satin or the flat, and I do not like it. That's my personal choice. I do not like the way it goes on, because you usually, in order to get the coverage you want, you have to spray more than you need.
Yeah. So now Sparky's got a question there. He said, do we clear coat after each step? I mean, that's, I think
yes.
Ralph and I have established that. How many steps are there to weathering? It depends. There are 13 for this. and there was only one step of clear coating as part of it.
And that was a pre-painted car, manufactured car.
Well, like this was like it was an undecorated car, so I mean, I did go from primer all the way up, but if you sort of count at the point at which I was ready to go, how long am I going to be? I don't know. How everybody doing? That I have my son coming in asking me how long I'm going to be. Well, we're going to talk about that. So okay. So I'll see you in a little bit. All right. Okay. He doesn't necessarily know what live means. So okay. Anyway, Ian, if I'm going to finish, I need to finish. Okay. Every time I do a live stream, he wanders in at one point and wonders when I'm going to be done. So, Sparky, does that answer your question? So, the part of that oh, okay. Sorry, I'm trying to bring up the right question. Now, we did actually have a question that is more for our UK viewers. That this is definitely outside of our respective comfort zones, but I'm still gonna share this. Actually, I need to add one more here where we are. Share screen and window and this one. Okay. So welcome to Across the Pond. Yeah. This is definitely outside of our field of expertise, because there's certain things in even the construction of a wagon like this that we're not even sure of, because understanding the material but also the weathering environment can go a long way in helping us understand that. So I mean, I'm seeing very little, very little paint on this. It's if like there's a little bit, of course, where the markings are.
Unless they used the red primer and left it that color.
True.
But
Yeah.
the shell of that the tub, as far as I'm concerned, has no paint on it at all.
Yeah, like, would you say that's galvanized, or would you say
It
it's
kind
aluminum?
of looks that way.
Okay. Yeah, because all of the rivets are clearly rusted, or at least as I can tell. So, and of course, we do get a few UK viewers on our respective channels in terms of things like weathering. Like, one of the things in North America is because there's so many different climates. You know, if you're in the Southwest United States, very different than the Southeast United States, very different from even the environment between where Ralph is in Ontario is very different from where I am on the West Coast. Although there's a shared similarity that the humidity is a little higher. It's actually much higher where he is, but out here gets a whole lot of rain. Think Seattle. Whereas here in the United Kingdom is the weather, because it's being an island off the north end of Europe is, I mean, okay, I'm oversimplifying, but because it's on the north end of the Gulf Stream, in some respects, the weather in the UK is not dissimilar to the west coast of Canada, in terms of, but notorious for fog and certainly a moisture environment. And so, understanding how that affects things, but not only that, and the things that we're not equipped for, is how the local rail companies actually deal with things, addressing how they paint or manufacture their rail cars for use in that environment, because they're doing that kind of adaptation. So, any thoughts on this one, Ralph?
I don't see a whole hell of a lot of rust on this thing.
Yeah, I mean,
it looks like it, but it's not I don't see any fresh rust except for on that door flap that's open.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only place I see fresh rust. Everything else is that brown, like it's primered.
Yep.
Even the spring over the wheel
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have any fresh rust on it.
Okay.
The bracket that's holding the axle, no fresh rust.
Mm-hmm.
Not even oil spillage.
Yeah.
And my bet is that car come around in a similar time as we got the first top gods or gondolas to replace depot gods, to replace the bottom drop coal chutes that were, silver side hoppers in the United States, that were that cheap aluminum stuff that we get over here. Now the Brits had the really high quality aluminium, but
yeah, but even so,
it's going to have a different effect, of course.
Not aluminium. That's maybe how the Brits pronounce it.
I know. I use it as a pseudo joke that it's different material, but
okay. Well, if that is aluminum, I'm not sure that, because aluminum, when it corrodes, it goes white.
Yeah.
That's just on the gray side. It's not white yet, so I'm not quite sure whether it's an aluminum car or not.
Mm. Yeah, like, is aluminum, or is it galvanized? Now it looks like it's welded along the edges, and I'm not seeing any kind of rust along there at all.
Although it could have been painted gray.
It could be.
You never know.
Yeah. So this is one of these things of all of a sudden we like here we are. I don't know about you, Ralph, but I put this one up, and I'm a little out of my depth. I mean, I would have to do more research
Oh, absolutely. And
Um,
I don't even know whether I'd want to weather a car like that. There's just too much in the way of nooks and crannies to get at.
mhm. Yeah. I'd be curious of the construction. One of the things that if having a I would be curious to see what the models for something like this look like. Um, so,
Yeah.
so, all right, I'm gonna pull that one down. So, I mean, we're just sitting a little bit over an hour. There's a question here. Actually, let me pull this one up. And there's a second one. Some of the do's and don'ts for weathering. I think my first note is don't not try it.
Some of the do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
You'll never know what the do's and don'ts are if you don't try something.
Yes.
And then you'll know if it works or not. And if it doesn't work, don't do it.
Yeah.
But that's where going to train shows, buying up those bargain bin cars to practice on. If you have an idea in your mind how you want to do it, that's fine. But try and work from a prototype photograph, and experiment on those cars. That's all I can tell you. The do's and don'ts. People are going to tell you you can't put acrylic on top of oil base. You can't put oil base on top of acrylic. All of that goes out the window. We're not talking about major stuff here. Everything gets sealed between coats, at least I do. And because I've sealed that layer, I can move on to the next layer and use either the same product, or I can go to the opposite, like from oil to acrylic or from acrylic to oil. The nice thing about the acrylics, like if you use acrylic clears, because they dry and they dry hard, you can then put your oils on top and move them around on top without worrying about the oil biting into it and going below. So you'll never know unless you try.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the big thing. It's just like do that. And I mean, there's certain things, like, for example, I mean, I don't exactly make it a secret that I'm not all that fond of weathering powders and pigments, but that's because I don't find I get the kind of results that I want. But on the other hand, for example, this actually comes with weathering pigments, and I did use weathering pigments on various parts of this.
But let's just clarify, the pigments that you used are pigments, not chalk, not pastels, which are chalk.
Yes.
So pigments always work better than pastels. A lot of guys are going to tell you they do all their weathering with pan pastels and so on. That's all fine and dandy. If you getting good results with it, you go right ahead. But if you want a powder that's going to be resilient enough to stand handling, then you want to go to a pigment that is true paint pigment. And the ones I recommend are Bragdon, Aim, or Monroe. I don't know of it well. And then there's the ammo ones. I've stayed away from the ammo ones. I have some of them. They're okay, but I like the Bragdon or the Aim or the Monroe. And Aim and Monroe, by the way, are the same.
Yeah,
it's just bought out by Monroe.
Right. And I mean, I've got some of the Bragdon, but I've also got various others. But I find quite often, unless there's this particular effect that I'm going for, that like one of the things that pigments and these kinds of things can do better than anything else is texture. And particularly if you're getting that kind of pitted rust sort of thing, like one of the places where I did use that is on the roof of this box car. that it actually provides that kind of when something begins to rust extensively, that it starts developing a texture on it, and found that was really good. But anyway, this kind of goes back to more like we're kind of going off on one particular tangent. Is the big thing is to the do is try it. The other thing is that one of the things that I recommend is, especially if you're kind of starting out, don't be afraid. Like, don't go for the cheapest materials you can find, because they actually may not help you in terms of learning the techniques. Now, that having been said, I mean, John Peters, who's one of the judges, does actually use acrylic craft paint to do a fade, but he's also a professional artist, and he knows how to use it.
Yep.
And so, like, keep that in mind. Whereas you're actually better off spending a little bit more money on some materials that are going to do the job a little bit better, and then that way you're kind of getting some better results right out of the hatch. I mean, one of my things is, if you want to see something like Ralph, what is, if you only could do one weathering technique on a car, and I realize you and I both don't do this, and we both say you need to, like, it's layering the effects is what works. But if there's one sort of go-to, which one would it be for you?
Well, now it's going to depend on the color of the car.
Right.
So if we're talking a black car, oxide red,
Mm-hmm.
or primer red sort of thing, those ones, that's where I would use the Starship grime or
Mm-hmm.
filth.
Yep.
On the black one, you'd have to go in the opposite direction and use a gray,
right,
like streaking grime.
Yep.
That's why I say my go-to is 1203, basically. Mm-hmm. But 1203 doesn't work on the burgundy or the red oxide or the primer red.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest colors for me, I find, to weather on, and not hardest, most difficult to weather, is black, the burgundy primer red sort of cars,
Mm-hmm.
and true red cars like CP.
Right.
Those to me are the most difficult, because you're really, how would you say it? You're really tied into how it's done. If you don't do it right, it's going to look like crap.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the experimenting comes in.
Yeah.
If you experiment with different products, different techniques, you'll know what to use and when.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there's a question there. Somebody's asking, how would you do a 1940s boxcar?
Mm-hmm. This relates directly to what you're just saying. So
yeah, exactly. So I try to fade. I mean, everything I do gets a fade, regardless. That way it changes the color slightly, and then it's easier to work with the weathering after that.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take on it.
Yeah. Okay. There's another question here from Sparky. We don't have the full question, at least on here, is that what got us into weathering, and how did we know that we could move on from a cheap train show to find a $350 model? Is it personal confidence?
Well, I don't know about you, but when I got into this hobby, I subscribed to all the different magazines, Gazette, Craftsman, and Model Railroader. Mm-hmm. And there was another one I can't remember. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's no longer produced.
Right.
So Model Railroader, especially because that was my main subscription. Mm-hmm. I renewed that every year.
Yeah.
The other ones, it was dependent on how I felt.
Mhm.
But you would see these guys, especially in the, and this is where it sort of crossed the phases, like in Ghostbusters.
Mhm.
Don't cross the streams.
Yes.
In the Gazette, narrow gauge Gazette, everything is weathered to the nth degree, to the point where it looks like you're looking at the real thing.
Mhm.
You now look at Model Railroader magazine, and right on the front cover is these buildings with a train going through it. But the buildings have some weathering on them, and the trains are like new toys coming through the scene.
Yeah.
That bugged the ass off me. So that's what got me into weathering. It was because of Gazette on how they did things, and what I saw in real life compared to what I see on the cover of Model Railroader, that got me into weathering.
Yeah. My story is a little different because, of course, I come at this from a wargaming perspective. Is that I'd done model railroading as a kid, but from about I'd gotten into miniature painting largely with role playing games and fantasy games, particularly Warhammer 40,000 was the game that particularly when I was in my 30s, and I played orcs, which imagine our big greens, hulking green skinned soccer hooligans who just everything that they build is like ramshackle and rundown, and of course everything in this is actually quite cartoony. It's and so and I always wanted to how do we make something look realistic, and then it was in the process of this that one of their side companies called Forge World had released a book called Imperial Armor Model Masterclass that took in what the military modelers were doing into this fantasy genre that I was working with, and all of a sudden that it completely changed the way that I paint. And as a matter of fact, I started doing some science fiction modeling. Let's see if I can pull this down without breaking it. Is of course this one, Millennium Falcon, and so this was among one of the things that I started doing this even after I got into model railroad weathering, at least a little bit, but fairly early on, and just realizing that I could apply these techniques to model trains, which I was in process of getting back into as an adult, and then discovering partway through that in fact some of the techniques that I was learning from the military modelers, many model railroaders hadn't even heard of, and thought, well, let's see how this works.
Yep.
And that's how that kind of that kind of works. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And just because I was already a modeler, I would experiment on cards and things like that. And then finally, just the rolling stock, I just started experimenting on stuff that I had collected, and started going with that. So, and have I had any issues mixing AK and Vallejo products on models? So far, no, I've not had that. The only thing that I have is that you do not want to thin Vallejo model color paints with alcohol.
Right.
I learned that the hard way and nearly destroyed my airbrush.
Oh, I did. I took me 4 hours to clean out my brush.
Yeah, well, I ran it through my airbrush, and I was going, what the heck's happening? Because it's just spitting out goo. And suddenly realized, and so I opened up the whole thing, and I had to completely wash the whole thing out. But yeah, I think that would be my only thing, is that Vallejo model color paints do not use their thinners.
There's the model color, and there's also Panzer Aces, which is also Vallejo.
Yeah.
They also have the Model Air,
Hmm.
which is supposed to be thinned enough to put through an airbrush.
Have you had much luck with that? Or
And no, it's better to thin it a bit more.
um, I will say with this particular car, it was the first time that I was using
The
the
MIG acrylics.
the MIG acrylics, and they thin with alcohol beautifully. It was an amazing paint to work with, like very very thin. Uh, like just thin with a little bit of 91% alcohol, and it like the spray on it was so fine,
Right.
and not only that, it cleaned out of my airbrush just like that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
so there's a product endorsement, I guess, like the MIG, those MIG acrylic paints in the stopper bottles that look like the Vallejo ones. They're good, but those ones actually come with a little steel mixing ball inside them.
Yep.
So when you shake them, you get that kind of clacking, and it mixes up really well.
I like the new AK acrylic paints.
Mm.
The
Oh,
next generation.
the real color ones?
No, the
Or
next
no,
generation. They're acrylics. They're in the bottle like the Vallejos and
right. Okay.
right. They thin out so nicely
Mm-hmm.
to spray through your
Okay.
airbrush. They
Okay.
really are
So
nice.
you're talking not the real colors, which are more that act more like the Tamiya paint.
The real colors are lacquers.
Yeah, they are lacquers. So you're talking the acrylics in there,
Yeah.
in the dropper bottles. And so, all right. I'm realizing we're coming up on. I think we're going to try and wrap this up for on the hour 30 mark. It might be an idea, but so I mean, Sparky, to you, the big thing is just experiment, and just as you're moving through, like I have some locomotives. I've got a Scale Trains locomotive that I haven't weathered yet.
Oh, you're gonna have fun.
And I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's an ES44, so it won't have a lot of weathering on it, but I am working. Admittedly, going back to you assume that I'm confident enough to weather a lot of my own stuff. Curiously enough, people have been sending me commissions, and I've been weathering their stuff, and that has given me more the certainly more confidence. Not that I'm experimenting on theirs. So like it becomes I need to do a good job on their material. So what I do is I go to some of my own stuff and practice before I actually work on something that somebody's commissioned me for. And that has actually helped a lot in terms of moving forward. So I'm just trying to see if there's any other questions. Andy, did you have any other questions to kind of throw at us, or want to throw us into another question, realizing that for some like for me it's approaching maybe 6 o'clock on the West Coast, but that's close to 9 o'clock for a number of you.
So I have two kind of things. One, just as an additive thing, that you were mentioning the Louisville Nashville, and I was a Louisville Nashville Railroader modeler and still am. Something that's a real interesting prototype that I might draw your attention to that got repainted is these are not a Western locomotives that are particularly cool, and some of those made it to Canadian later. It's not an actual railroad. They got tired of not getting the coal delivered on time because of the shortage of power in the 80s. So the mine and the power company went together and built these trains, run them over L&N trackage or whatever. They were still in service in 86. They went out of service in 87. I'm going to get a half these and run these. And they repainted them later in the gray colors, but they're green. And they're particularly cool when you find them painted in the working with Canadian prototypes, because the BC got some of them, and particularly cool, like there. So anyway, that's a bit of an odd thing you were talking about. Something that I have a bit of I have an obvious interest in and maybe we want to talk about the next show, is there's so many of these car types that are dramatically different from each other. Flat cars are one example, and I had a bunch of examples of flat cars I thought to bring up first. You got wood decks and steel decks, and they're so variable. But even coal hoppers, there's so much variance between various coal hoppers. Even if they're all black, they weather in some incredibly unique ways.
Well, you know what does that, eh? It's the fact that they're not all painted in the same shop.
Absolutely. Well, and even the alloy of metals is going to be different, and where they actually existed, and the grade of coal, and there's so much. But the question that I really have that I'm getting at here is, if you're modeling a single car, there's a lot of things you can think about and concede to. If you're fleet weathering, especially if you're fleet weathering cars like well cars or TOFC or COFC flat cars or coal hoppers, do you have any particular thoughts on how you can ensure that you get some dynamicism or in that what would otherwise potentially be somewhat monotonous to actually do the weathering, and maybe a bit monotonous when you have blocks of cars as well?
I think something that would be useful that we probably don't have necessarily time to cover. I mean, that we could maybe use this as a kind of a segue to the next show or segment that we do, and do that sooner rather than a month gap. Is to talk about like for example, we're doing a weathering contest. You're submitting one thing in each category, as opposed to a train. Ralph, I remember you saying something fairly on that generally, if people are looking at a train going by, they're looking at the beginning and the end, and maybe it's something in the middle.
No, what ends up happening, and this goes for the weathering. You weather your locomotive to the nines. You weather the end of the train. If you're pulling a caboose, you weather it to nines, and everything in between can be so weathered. Because when the train goes by, you're looking at the locomotive. The stuff that's in the middle goes by, it's a blur, and then you watch the end go by.
Yeah. And curiously enough, there's one thing when you're painting, say, something like in Warhammer 40,000 or something like that. So when you're painting a lot of models where bulk painting is actually like you set up an assembly line that, okay, I'm doing orcs, paint the skin. Okay, done the skin, go through and paint the shirts and the pants and then everything. So you're doing sort of one thing at a time in terms of bulk. But the other thing is that you also have your centerpiece models, and then your secondary centerpieces, and then the minions.
Right.
And so when you're doing kind of bulk weathering like that, you almost have to figure out who your what your minions are. I mean, if you're doing a unit train, the whole thing is our minions.
But each car is weathered just slightly different.
Oh yeah, and each time you go through, like even if you're doing them sort of like I would line them up.
Like your fade could be the same throughout but I wouldn't do more than 3 at a time. That way you guarantee that the next 3 is going to be different than the last 3.
That's true.
You know, even though you're using the same techniques, you're not going to make them exactly the same. I watched a video, I guess it was about a year ago, of these 2 guys, and they ran a coal train. One was on either side of the benchwork with an airbrush. And they ran the train between the 2 of them, and they airbrushed the train as it went by. And that's how they weathered it.
Wow.
So in that case, every car is weathered identical.
I think that's interesting, but I find that pretty impractical for a bunch of other reasons. It's a very good, I love the comedy of trying to do it that way. But
yeah. I mean, Ralph. Like, if I were doing it, I would probably do up to 5 cars, like 5 cars at a time.
Yeah, but you work in N scale, so your
Yeah,
work table can allow 5 cars.
right. That is true. I mean,
My work table is not all that big.
yeah, yeah. That is true. Of course, like and of course, if one is working in O scale. I mean, I once had a group of 5 HO scale cars and was working on them sort of over a period of time. I wouldn't necessarily say I was weathering in bulk because each of them were different. But yeah, that did take up a lot of real estate on my table.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally hear you there. So
here's a question for you. This guy he loves the thinner AK or Vallejo, but he wants to know what you recommend to use a higher PSI. If your paint is thin properly, it doesn't matter what product you're using. You use the same PSI. So you want to try and thin your paint so that it's the consistency of skim milk.
Yeah.
Not water, skim milk.
Yeah.
That's almost like water, but not quite.
Yeah. So when you swish it around, like I mix my paints usually in like a clear medicine cup. You can go to the pharmacy and just buy those in like big packages, and put the paint in and kind of swirl it around and kind of sticks up on the edges. I mean, here's my and he's got one there. One of my little confessions is that my airbrush compressor is actually stuck on the same pressure setting. I can't change it.
Well, yeah, that's not true. It has that power switch on the bottom. So that gives you two different pressures.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, I'm not talking the portable. The portable. I'm talking the Grex air compressor.
Okay.
The actual pressure control valve on it is stuck, and what I need to do is I need to
take it apart and work on it.
Yeah. It's basically like what you see Andy holding there. That's what I have on mine that is actually stuck. Now, fortunately, it's stuck at a usable pressure.
Okay. Sure. Because I don't use the regulator drawn by air compressor. I mean, maybe it's pulling it down to 30 or 40, but I'm not using it meaningfully.
Yeah.
When I use my airbrush, I'm spraying anywhere between 12 to 15 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for everything.
Yeah.
Except for primer. And if you're going to do something from the beginning, then yes, you're going to need primer.
Yeah.
And I changed the pressures so that I can spray Stynylrez.
Mm-hmm.
Your one shot that was in the bottle there, that is Stynylrez.
Yeah. This is it's great stuff. I mean, I would.
It's thick right out of the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
They suggest you do not thin it.
You don't need to.
And it sprays beautifully, and it levels right down to this perfect finish.
Well, here's my little secret is that I paint the facings of my of metal wheels with that stuff just straight, like not even like straight out of the bottle, just as a little, and it works really well. So we got another question that are we going to do another live stream before the contest is over? Yes, we will. The question is it's a matter of setting a date. I happen to be on a vacation from work right now, so we could potentially do one sooner rather than later. So, but I think given that, and given that we are an hour and 33 minutes in, that I hope people have found this helpful. Ralph, anything else?
Actually, no. But in answer to the question, you're going to do more live streams. I kind of think that even after the contest is over, we should consider carrying on.
I think so too.
for a whole number of things, a number of reasons. You know, like I normally did a monthly show with Model Railroading Live. We talked about it the other night, bringing you on as my cohort on the show. So that would be another means of staying online live.
And would absolutely love to do that. I would be honored to be your color commentator or however we're going to have that. And certainly one of the reasons why these live streams have been able to work so well is because of Model Railroading Live offering their support, particularly Andy Crawford, but to Model Railroading Live as well. And the nice thing is we can actually broadcast them over multiple channels, and so we've been able to do that. So yes, that is we are going to do them even beyond the end of Down and Dirty Weathering Contest number 3. But at the same, but we can do this as often as, because as you can see, when Ralph and I get talking, we get talking.
Just as a reminder, you have not John, you guys out there, you have until, what is it, the 6th
of September
to get your entries in.
Yeah, 6th of September, midnight Hawaiian time. And it's just to let September 6th around the globe, because we have people from Australia entering, we have people from in Europe who've expressed interest and who are entering. So it's from across the globe. So we wanted to make sure that the deadline was sort of a universal. Here's midnight Hawaiian time on the 6th. So for some of you, that could actually be halfway through the day on the 7th. But that's where we're. I think that's where we're going to take it. And I hope that everybody had this. Also, just some of the pictures we're starting to be emailed into Midwest Model Railroad. Please do check out their website, because the People's Choice Award is very much a part of that. And I'm kind of hoping that at least on one of our next live streams that we'll have a chance to talk to Brandon Day, who is the representative from Midwest Model Railroad, to talk to us a little bit, because they're doing some expansions and things like that. It's just a matter of scheduling something that works with Brandon that we're going to have. But as far as a show continuing past the formal end of the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest, well, Ralph and I are already working on it, and I'm the more than happy to be Ralph's lackey.
My what?
Lackey.
Oh. I'll get the whip out. Okay.
So we can make that work. But it's been an honor to be able to work with you, Ralph, on this. And again, thank you to Andy. And just as we're getting ready to wrap up, there's certainly more to come, and you can send any of your if you want to. I'm just going to put my my email address here, just in the that you can. That is not correct. Do not follow that one. And I learn how to type correctly.
Yeah.
So the one you want is this one. So in terms of emailing any questions that you might have for what our next show might be, and just allowing us a chance to questions that you might have, because we might do something like, I know that I want to do a video on clear coats specifically, but Ralph and I did one quite a while ago. Was it just me? Anyway, we did something on clear coats previously, but it might be worth doing a more concise video rather than a show like this. But we can also talk about talk about different things and different questions that you have. And the big thing is, when it comes to weathering, just get out there and do it. Look for the bargain basements. Look for those bargain bins. Pull out the pieces of junk and try it on those.
The problem most of you guys have now is because it's outside of your comfort zone. In order to do it, you have to just step outside and play with it. It's actually quite fun.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get yourself past that initial, I don't know what I'm doing sort of thing, it's easy once you get the hang of it. And what I've always said is, you practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the better you get. The better you get, the more confidence you build. The more confidence you build, the more willing you are to tackle anything, including that $300-400 locomotive that you just got. Which, JC, you were just saying you're going to be working on the scale trains one.
I've got a scale trains ES44.
HO?
No,
N scale. Okay, so I can't speak to the N scale, but I can speak to the HO scale.
Mm-hmm.
I spent 2.5 hours online with the guys. We're usually online every night, and I was trying to get the trucks apart because I literally take them apart, take the wheels out, take the side frames and paint them separately. I could not get those wheels apart. Mm-hmm. I had to send an email to Scale Trains, and they answered me back within an hour on how to get the frame of the truck apart. Mm-hmm. You'll also find that a lot of these companies now are using a lot of crazy glue. Mm-hmm. So there might be a point where either the front rail or part of the side rail, if it's just the one that goes up to the cab from the step, might be glued in place. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I will find out on that. Now, fortunately, with that particular model, it's a fairly light weathering touch because of the era that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Is that in my era, it needs something because it needs to look realistic. I mean, here's another one just for an eventual. Something called anti-weathering. I saw somebody actually do this. They actually weathered a tank car in such a way to make it look like it literally had just rolled off of the production line, to make it look big, and yet it was because even the scale models, it made it look like it was not a scale model. It looked like a big new car, and that's harder in some respects than making it look like a piece of junk.
Oh, come on.
But I have that scenario as well, where I'm going to have some excursion service that are super well maintained, and steam locomotives in gloss, they're particularly, it's a bit of anti-weathering.
Mm-hmm.
But steam locomotives, unless it's like what the hell did they call them? They gave them names. Mm-hmm. Even though they were a specific wheel configuration, they gave them names,
right?
Like they do with the diesels, the George Washington or the George Bush or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even those that are like they came out of the shop don't have a gloss on them. Mm-hmm. And if you actually put a gloss on something, it's going to look like a toy because the gloss material does not scale down beyond HO or O scale.
Yeah, I think I could see the difference per your recommendation of using semi-gloss. That makes more sense. But the prototype pictures of the I've seen them in person. Of course, the famous 600 Class J is let's say shiny. Forget the word gloss. It is a shiny finish versus that typical cast iron flat.
Yeah,
it's much gloss.
But that's specifics, and
yes.
I wouldn't go any shinier than a semi-gloss.
Yeah. So,
but generally for everything, if you don't even venture into weathering, but you want something to look different, dull coat it.
Yeah, make sure it's got a good flat coat, because that's really a very good starting point. Anyway, on that note, I think we do need to wrap it up, and we've got plenty of topics to do this going forward. So with this, I think I'm going to bring the broadcast to a close. But again, thank you to everyone. Ralph, thank you very much. Andy,
You're
thank
welcome.
you for all of your help, and good luck, and may you keep on track.
Right on.